something that resurfaces also in his writings about the metropolis and the mental life in metropolis. So in modern terms, we would also say that the level of stress in larger cities or burnouts are more common. Last but not least, the kind of rules that are used in the larger groups are, let's say, more abstract. They have to cover many more people at a time, and let's say it's less about proverbs that are about individual behaviors. These have to be very abstract kind of rules to govern. Also a bit reminiscent here of Weber's bureaucratic mode of governance. Yeah. This is all about correlates of larger groups vis-a-vis smaller groups. Simmel then also goes on to explain what determines then different groups. In an actor-centric way, one explanation is that groups themselves obviously think about themselves as also as of different sizes. There are also symbolic meanings attached to certain sizes, right? So in the biblical context, for instance, a group of 12 is such a number, such that dinner societies of 12 are deemed to be sort of a norm to follow. Just company law, certain sizes of companies, like having 2,000 employees in a company, are also linked with organizing workers' councils, at least in German law. So groups themselves can reflect on the size, and depending on this, also choose different forms of sizes and governance. I already mentioned that there are laws and rules in societies that might be difficult to influence by actors and to change or reinstall. But many of our, let's say, social interactions, it takes two to tango, a dinner party of 13 is not something you should aim for. So society comes with a baggage of norms. Simmel, as being influenced also by Spencer and evolutionary theory, also offers a functional explanation of why groups of certain sizes exist, and makes the observation that for some it may be necessary even for survival. So when you think about the relationship between group size and different features that go along with a group size, so far I think implicitly are mainly stated linear relationships, right? So you add a certain member to the group, let's say the internal differentiation, the division of labor, becomes sort of one unit stronger, or you lose a member in a group and there are more energies that can be used. Simmel already observes that this relationship does not need to be linear. It could also be what in modern terms has been called sub or superlinear. So this is in a book by the social physicist Geoffrey West. Here, the book Scale, a starting observation. So Geoffrey West is someone who looks at huge data sets of cities, for instance, of all different kinds of sizes, and links the size of the city with, for instance, the level of energy that is spent at the city. Or he collects huge numbers of firms and the sizes of firms, how many employees, how much turnover, etc., and links it to different ways of internal organizations. And his the result of his physical models is to reveal these sublinear or superlinear scalings. In a superlinear scaling, it may be the case then that when you add an additional 100,000 people to a city, the city might not produce an additional, let's say, number of waste, yeah, or amount of waste, but it might produce even more waste. So in a superlinear way, you double the population, but the waste the city produces is sort of fourfold. Or the reverse would be you double or you, let's say, shrink the number of employees by half. Yeah? So, as Elon Musk did with a Twitter workforce, for instance. And it could be the case then that the, let's say, internal communications might only shrink at 20%. Yeah. So this would be a sublinear case where the relationship between, in this case, then the number of employees and the number of interactions between employees is not proportionate. And this is already something that Simmel observed, and Geoffrey West probably did here in the most sophisticated way in social physics. So Simmel also makes the observation that simple size in absolute terms is often not what is determinant, but it's often also the relative numbers. He also mentions something that later became quite important in the sociology of social movements, namely thresholds, right? That it's the relationship of different sizes and different aspects of groups is not continuous, but there are certain moments where just a feature gets switched on. Yeah. So when a threshold is reached, then yeah, the revolution starts, for instance. Yeah? So in the 20th century, sociology, Mark Granovetter is one of the key authors who highlight the importance of thresholds, particularly when it comes also to social movements. So sort of when you have 100 people rebelling on the street, it's not enough. It's not enough to add another 1, 2, 3 persons. But once you reach that threshold, a critical threshold, then the revolution starts, so to speak. Yeah, okay, and Simmel also plays with this idea that there may be even something like social constants in analogy to physical constants that, yeah, for instance, you can only organize a democratic society with local representation only if you have a city-state that does not go beyond, let's say, the reach of a voice on the marketplace of some kind, right? Or that the household economy in patriarchal household arrangements cannot go beyond 20 to 30. Yeah, so this was part of Simmel's sociology of groups and group size. Let me close this little introduction to Simmel, which you may simply take as inspiration to go down the Simmel road yourself a little bit more, is then on conflicts and his thoughts on conflicts. And conflict is a term that is a little bit negatively connotated, obviously, but for Simmel, conflict has actually not only this disruptive meaning here, where he also comes up with different correlations of how, let's say, disruptive, how violent a conflict is, yeah. But for Simmel, conflict is also just a mode of integration. Yeah. So for Simmel, for instance, a competitive relationship in economic terms is obviously a mode of conflict in that competitors A and B are striving for the same thing, but it is clear by the rules of competition that they cannot simultaneously reach it. So it is a mode of conflict, but for simmel it is an indirect one when compared to the more outright use of violence, yeah, where just a competitor A beats or completely destroys competitor B. Yeah, so competition is in a way then for simmel a conflict, but an indirect one that differentiates society even further, right? It pushes competitor B to offer a different product, for instance, to sort of circumvent also this conflict. So conflict is a productive force also that helps to push further the social differentiation of society. Or it may also be a mode also in hierarchical relationships for the subordinate classes to express discontent and yeah, it's kind of channel their discontent through different modes of conflicts, but hence also to find ways to stabilize society again. So opposed then to this, let's say, integration mode of conflict, then there is clearly also the, let's say, disruption mode of conflict. And simmel observes then that conflicts can get more and more violent the more, for instance, it involves the entire person, right? Not just a certain social role of a person. The more also the persons involved in the conflicts are led by super individual ideas. So you may simply say ideologies that they stick to. But also the more their conflict involves the very core beliefs. So the nastiest kinds of conflicts are probably those where the individuals are most similar, right? Think about